The day you realize your paycheck is a cage. Nobody tells you the moment it begins, not the moment you become broke, the moment you become dependent. It happens quietly. A teenager gets praised for getting their first job. A young adult learns to survive on monthly paychecks. An exhausted parent starts measuring life in bills, deadlines, and weekends that disappear too fast. Then one day, years later, they wake up with dark circles under their eyes, staring at a ceiling at 6 in the morning, asking a question they are almost afraid to say out loud. How did I work this hard and still feel trapped? That question changes lives, because the dangerous part is not being poor. The dangerous part is becoming comfortable inside financial captivity. There are people making $40,000 a year who feel trapped. People making $80,000 who feel trapped. People making $200,000 who still feel trapped because their entire life depends on continuing to run on a treadmill that never stops moving. And the system rewards that exhaustion. It praises burnout and calls it ambition. But tonight, in this audiobook, something needs to shift inside you. Because this is not just about making money. This is about building money machines. This is about learning how to stop carrying your entire financial life on your back like a man dragging stones uphill while other people quietly build systems that carry wealth for them. In this audiobook, you're going to discover why some people stay financially anxious no matter how much they earn, while others create quiet streams of income that continue flowing, whether they are sleeping, traveling, reading, spending time with family, or simply sitting in silence watching rain hit the windows at midnight. You will learn the hidden psychological difference between workers and builders, between consumers and owners, between people who chase money and people who construct systems that attract it. We will break down why modern wealth in 2026 no longer belongs only to corporations, hedge funds, or people born into privilege. Because something changed. Technology changed. Attention changed. Leverage changed. And for the first time in history, one focused person with clarity can build digital assets, automated systems, audience leverage, intellectual property, and income streams from a bedroom, a small apartment, a quiet cafe, or a laptop sitting on a kitchen table at 2 in the morning while the rest of the city sleeps. But none of it starts with strategy. It starts with a realization. The realization that your salary is not your freedom. Your salary is only your first tool. That sentence alone can change a life. Because most people build their identity around income instead of ownership. And ownership changes everything. A paycheck feeds the month. A machine feeds the future. There is a difference, a massive difference. A tired warehouse worker in Poland once spent 10 years believing overtime would save him financially. Every extra shift felt responsible, mature, necessary. He sacrificed holidays, missed birthdays, worked through exhaustion. Yet every year his life looked almost identical to the year before. One winter evening, sitting inside his car after another 12-hour shift, he realized something painful. He had increased effort for years, but never increased leverage. That was the beginning of his transformation, not because he suddenly became rich overnight, but because he started asking different questions. That is where wealth actually begins, not with money, with questions. What can continue paying me after the work is finished? What can I own instead of endlessly renting my survival through labor? What skills can become assets? What knowledge can become systems? What attention can become income? Those questions create a new mind, and a new mind creates a new financial reality. The wealthy are not simply people with more money. Many rich people are stressed, addicted, emotionally lost, and deeply unhappy. Real wealth is something calmer, something quieter. Real wealth is waking up without panic. Real wealth is having time to think clearly. Real wealth is having choices. Real wealth is the ability to say no. No to toxic environments. No to desperation. No to humiliating dependence. No to living every month on the edge of anxiety. And most people never experience that because they were trained to survive instead of build. Think about how people are educated. Study, obey, memorize, work, repeat. But almost nobody teaches construction. Nobody teaches how income systems work. Nobody explains leverage. Nobody explains compounding. Nobody explains audience ownership. Nobody explains digital scalability. Nobody explains that a single well-built asset can outperform years of exhausting labor. So people spend decades becoming efficient workers while never learning how to become architects of income. That is why this audiobook matters. Because the moment you understand money machines, life stops feeling random. You start seeing hidden patterns everywhere. A creator uploads one video that continues generating revenue for years. A software developer builds one tool used by thousands. A writer publishes one book that sells globally while they sleep. An investor buys assets that quietly compound in the background of their life. A business owner creates systems that function without constant supervision. At first, it looks unfair. Then you realize something important. Most of those people were not born understanding this either. They simply crossed a psychological bridge most people never cross. They stopped asking, "How hard must I work?" and started asking, "How intelligently can I build?" That shift changes your entire relationship with effort, because effort still matters. Discipline matters. Consistency matters. Focus matters. But effort without direction becomes self-destruction. You see this everywhere now. People working non-stop while secretly deteriorating inside. Overstimulated, distracted, financially dependent, emotionally exhausted. Modern society created millions of people who know how to earn, but not how to escape earning dependency. And there is a hidden emotional cost to that dependency nobody talks about enough. It slowly steals your imagination. A tired mind stops dreaming. A stressed person becomes reactive instead of creative. Bills consume attention. Pressure consumes energy. Survival consumes identity. That is why many adults no longer feel alive, not because they are lazy, because they are mentally trapped inside maintenance mode. This is why building money machines is not just financial. It is psychological freedom. The ability to breathe again. The ability to think long-term again. The ability to sit quietly and ask yourself what kind of life you actually want before time disappears. Because time is disappearing faster than most people realize. One day you are at 22 believing life is beginning. Then suddenly your parents are aging. Friends are burned out. Your body gets tired faster. Years start collapsing into each other. And somewhere deep inside, a terrifying thought appears. What if I spend my whole life maintaining survival without ever truly building freedom? That thought wakes people up, sometimes painfully. A man in Brazil realized it after missing his daughter's school performance because his boss refused to approve leave. A woman in South Korea realized it while answering work emails from a hospital waiting room beside her exhausted mother. A freelancer in Canada realized it after earning more money than ever, but discovering he had accidentally built another prison, one where every dollar still depended entirely on his personal output. Different countries, different lives. Same realization. Money without systems creates fragile stability, and fragile stability creates permanent anxiety. That is why the rich obsess over assets. Not because they are greedy, because assets reduce fragility. A money machine is anything that continues creating value after the initial effort is completed. Read that again carefully. That definition can reshape your future. A money machine could be a business, a dividend portfolio, digital products, a licensing deal, real estate, content libraries, software, automated e-commerce, intellectual property, media assets, audience ownership, education systems, royalties, infrastructure, even reputation itself when leveraged correctly. But before any external machine is built, an internal machine must exist first. Because most people sabotage wealth emotionally before they ever sabotage it financially. They panic too early, quit too early, consume too much, seek validation constantly, fear uncertainty, fear judgment, fear temporary invisibility. But builders understand something workers often miss. The early stages of wealth creation are usually quiet, unimpressive, lonely even. A person builds for months with almost no visible reward, sometimes years. And during that season, the world misunderstands them, friends question them, family doubts them, social media distracts them, comparison poisons them. Yet they continue building anyway. That is where financial identity is forged. Not when success becomes visible, when discipline remains invisible. If this message is already resonating with you, pause for a second sometime tonight and ask yourself one honest question. What in my life currently earns only when I personally suffer for it? That question reveals everything, and over the next chapters, we are going to go much deeper into this hidden world most people never fully understand. The psychology of ownership, the emotional habits of builders, the danger of lifestyle inflation, why some people stay broke even after making more money, why focus matters more than motivation, why attention has become one of the most valuable assets on earth, why calm minds often build the strongest empires, and most importantly, how ordinary people quietly build extraordinary financial systems without fame, luck, or permission. Because the truth is, wealth is rarely loud while it is being built. Usually it begins in silence. A notebook, a late night, a new skill, a decision, a realization. A moment where somebody finally stops asking for rescue and starts building machinery instead. And in the next chapter, we need to talk about the invisible addiction that keeps millions trapped financially for life. Not poverty, consumption. Because the moment you understand why modern society trains people to spend emotionally instead of build intentionally, you begin seeing the entire game differently. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Hey there, we want to remind you that we often choose topics suggested by you, our viewers, in the comments. In the comments, you can suggest a topic or ask a question about what you'd like to see in our video. We read every comment carefully, so we promise not to miss a single one. Thank you. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. The addiction nobody calls dangerous. The most expensive habit in modern life does not look dangerous. It looks normal. It looks like Friday night shopping after an exhausting week. It looks like upgrading phones that still work perfectly. It looks like buying things to feel progress without actually progressing. It looks like stress disguised as reward. And the frightening part is this. Entire economies now depend on people staying emotionally impulsive, not financially intelligent, emotionally impulsive. Because a person who constantly consumes stays dependent. A person who constantly builds becomes difficult to control. That is why financial awakening often begins with discomfort. You start noticing things other people ignore. You notice how exhausted people reward themselves with purchases instead of recovery. You notice how loneliness becomes subscriptions, how insecurity becomes luxury branding, how boredom becomes endless online orders arriving at doors like temporary emotional anesthesia. The world learned how to monetize human emptiness, and most people never realize it is happening. A young man in London once increased his salary by nearly 40% within 2 years. From the outside, his life looked impressive. Better apartment, better clothes, better restaurants, better vacations. But one night, he sat at a small table reviewing his bank account and realized something humiliating. Despite earning more money than ever before, he still felt financially fragile because every increase in income had been matched by an increase in lifestyle. His money expanded, but his freedom did not. That realization crushed him. Then it educated him. Because wealth is not built from income alone. It is built from the gap between what comes in and what escapes. And modern culture trains people to close that gap immediately. The moment someone earns more, society whispers, upgrade, celebrate, spend, display. Very few voices say, build. That is why many high earners are secretly trapped. They own expensive symbols, but very few productive assets. And symbols cannot save you during instability. Only systems can. This is why the rich often look boring during the building phase. Quiet investments, simple routines, delayed gratification, long-term thinking. Meanwhile, the emotionally reactive person constantly seeks stimulation, and stimulation is expensive. One of the greatest hidden financial skills is emotional neutrality. The ability to not purchase every feeling. Think about that carefully. Some people spend when they are sad. Some spend when they are stressed. Some spend when they feel invisible. Some spend because social media convince them success must look luxurious immediately. But builders understand something profound. Every unnecessary expense is not just lost money, it is lost future leverage. $100 invested into temporary validation disappears. $100 invested into systems can multiply for years. Now imagine this over a decade. Thousands of small emotional decisions shaping entirely different futures. One person buys comfort repeatedly. Another buys ownership repeatedly. 10 years later, their lives barely resemble each other. And this is not about becoming obsessive or joyless. Real wealth is not extreme deprivation. Real wealth is intentionality. Knowing when something adds true value to your life, and when something is simply emotional sedation. There is a reason financially intelligent people ask different questions before spending. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" they ask, "Will this move me closer to freedom or further from it?" That question changes behavior. A woman in Singapore once described the exact moment her relationship with money transformed. She was standing inside a luxury store holding a designer handbag she had wanted for months. She could technically afford it, but then another thought entered her mind. This bag costs the same as a partial investment into the digital business I keep postponing. Suddenly, the purchase felt different, not forbidden, just expensive in a deeper way because every dollar carries opportunity cost. Every decision says something about the future you prioritize, and mature builders become deeply protective of future freedom, not because they fear spending, because they understand compounding. Compounding is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. People think compounding only applies to money. It applies to identity. Habits compound. Focus compounds. Knowledge compounds. Reputation compounds. Discipline compounds. Audience compounds. Trust compounds. Assets compound. And unfortunately, distraction compounds too. Debt compounds. Impulse compounds. Financial ignorance compounds. Emotional spending compounds. Years of avoidance compound. This is why small behaviors matter so much more than dramatic moments. A person rarely destroys their financial future with one catastrophic decision. Usually it happens through thousands of unconscious micro-decisions repeated over time. Small leaks sink large ships, and modern life is filled with leaks. Subscription overload, convenience addiction, status pressure, entertainment dependency, impulse buying triggered by algorithms designed by billion-dollar companies studying human psychology 24 hours a day. Understand this clearly. You are not weak because distraction exists. Entire industries compete for your attention now. Attention became one of the most valuable economic resources on earth because whoever controls attention often controls behavior. That is why wealthy builders protect focus almost aggressively. Focus creates assets. Distraction consumes them. And this becomes especially important in the age of digital opportunity because right now, in 2026, there are people quietly building incredible income systems from ordinary environments. A teacher recording educational content after work. A mechanic documenting expertise online. A nurse creating health education platforms. A designer selling templates globally. A small creator licensing digital products internationally. A programmer building automated tools, a writer publishing niche knowledge. Most of them started without extraordinary resources. What separated them was not genius. It was sustained focus long enough for compounding to begin. That is the phase where most people quit. The invisible phase. The phase where effort appears unrewarded. The gym feels pointless. The channel feels unnoticed. The business feels slow. The investment account feels tiny. The growth feels microscopic. But builders understand something emotionally difficult. The early stages of compounding always feel disappointing. At first, progress hides underground, like roots before trees. This is why patience is financially valuable. Not passive patience, strategic patience. There is a difference. Passive people wait, hoping life changes. Builders continue constructing while results remain temporarily invisible. That emotional endurance is rare, very rare, especially now. Modern culture trained people to expect instant feedback, instant replies, instant entertainment, instant validation, instant delivery, instant stimulation. But wealth rarely grows instantly. It grows quietly, slowly, then suddenly. And the suddenly part tricks observers. People see outcomes but not construction. They see the successful business but not the exhausted years beforehand. They see the investments but not the sacrifices behind them. They see the freedom but not the discipline required to create it. This creates dangerous illusions. Some people assume wealth is luck because they only witness the visible stage. But invisible years built visible success. Always. A man in Mexico spent 4 years learning digital marketing after work while friends mocked him for wasting time online. At first, nothing happened. Tiny projects, minimal income, slow progress. But eventually, his skill became leverage. Then leverage became clients. Then clients became systems. Then systems became a company. Years later, people called him lucky. They never saw the nights he almost quit. That is the hidden truth about money machines. Most are emotionally built before they are financially profitable. The person becomes capable first, then results appear. This is why your environment matters so much. Some environments normalize growth, others normalize stagnation. Pay attention to what people around you repeatedly discuss. Complaints, drama, celebrity gossip, endless negativity, or ideas, ownership, skills, opportunity, creation. Conversations shape emotional direction more than most people realize. If everybody around you worships consumption, building feels strange. If everybody around you fears risk, ownership feels dangerous. If everybody around you normalizes financial anxiety, freedom begins feeling unrealistic. That is why builders often experience loneliness before momentum. They start thinking differently before they start living differently. And thinking differently can initially feel isolating, especially when your goals require temporary sacrifice. There will be moments where people misunderstand your restraint, moments where others pressure you to spend emotionally just to maintain social belonging. But one of the quietest forms of maturity is learning to disappoint social expectations in order to protect your future. Not arrogantly, not disrespectfully, calmly, because you finally understand something most people spend decades avoiding. Temporary pleasure can become permanent limitation, and permanent freedom often requires temporary restraint. If this chapter resonates with you, I want you to do something honestly sometime after listening. Look through your recent spending history, not with guilt, with awareness. Ask yourself, how many purchases were truly useful, and how many were emotional reactions? That answer alone can shift your financial future because awareness changes behavior faster than shame ever will. And now we need to go deeper, because once someone begins escaping emotional consumption, another challenge appears almost immediately. Fear. Fear of building. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of starting too late. Fear of looking foolish while learning. In the next chapter, we are going to talk about why most people never build money machines, not because they lack intelligence, but because fear quietly trains them to remain financially obedient. And once you understand how fear manipulates financial decisions, you begin taking your power back. Chapter 3. Fear is the invisible employee. Fear has destroyed more futures than failure ever did. Failure, at least, teaches. Fear only delays. And the terrifying thing about fear is that it rarely sounds dramatic when it speaks inside your mind. It sounds practical, responsible, rational. Maybe next year. Maybe when I save more. Maybe when things feel safer. Maybe after life calms down. But life rarely calms down on its own. There is always another expense, another crisis, another distraction, another reason to postpone becoming the person you were meant to become. That is why some people spend their entire lives preparing for a future they never actually enter. And the system quietly rewards that hesitation because hesitant people remain dependent. Think about how many intelligent people stay financially trapped, not because they lack capability, but because they fear uncertainty more than they desire freedom. A brilliant designer keeps working a job she hates because starting independently feels risky. A skilled programmer never launches his product because he fears criticism. A talented musician hides creativity behind excuses because visibility feels uncomfortable. An experienced employee with years of knowledge never builds anything personal because failure feels humiliating. So they remain where they are, not because they cannot move, because fear convinced them staying stuck is safer than evolving. But there is something nobody explains clearly enough. Staying the same is also risky, very risky. Depending on one income source in a rapidly changing world is risky. Ignoring technology shifts is risky. Building no ownership is risky. Having no leverage is risky. Allowing inflation to quietly erode your purchasing power for decades is risky. People often fear entrepreneurial uncertainty while completely ignoring employment uncertainty. And modern economies change faster now than ever before. Artificial intelligence is restructuring industries. Automation is replacing repetitive tasks. Digital systems are reducing the value of purely manual labor. Attention economies are creating entirely new wealth pathways. The world is changing whether people emotionally accept it or not. And the people who adapt early often experience enormous advantages later, not because they predict perfectly, because they move before comfort disappears completely. A man in Germany once worked at the same logistics company for 14 years. Stable salary, predictable life, predictable routine. Then automation began reducing positions. Suddenly, security no longer felt secure. He later admitted something painful. I spent years thinking I was avoiding risk, but I was actually concentrating all my risk into one fragile structure. That sentence deserves reflection. Many people believe stability comes from employment alone, but real stability comes from adaptability and ownership. A strong mind, multiple skills, financial literacy, asset creation, emotional discipline, leveraged systems. Those create resilience, not blind dependence on institutions that can change overnight. And yet fear still keeps millions frozen. Why? Because humans are emotionally wired to avoid uncertainty. Your brain often interprets unfamiliarity as danger, even when that unfamiliarity could transform your life positively. This is why the beginning of every new financial identity feels emotionally uncomfortable. The first investment feels scary. The first video upload feels vulnerable. The first business attempt feels uncertain. The first public creation feels exposing. The first risk feels terrifying. But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is movement despite fear. That distinction changes lives. Because confident people are not fearless. They simply stopped obeying fear automatically. A woman in India once described how she built her first online business while terrified almost every day. She doubted herself constantly, compared herself constantly, felt behind constantly, but she kept moving anyway. Years later, she said something profound. The fear never fully disappeared. My relationship with it changed. That is maturity, not eliminating uncertainty, learning to function inside it. And builders become emotionally stronger because building itself forces growth. When you create something, you confront yourself, your procrastination, your inconsistency, your insecurity, your excuses, your impatience, your emotional reactions. Construction reveals character. That is why many people unconsciously avoid it. Because building money machines is not just financial work. It is identity work. You slowly become someone different, more patient, more observant, more intentional, more disciplined, more emotionally regulated. And this transformation often happens quietly before any visible success appears. A creator with 50 subscribers learns consistency. An investor with a tiny portfolio learns patience. A small entrepreneur learns problem solving. A beginner learns resilience through embarrassment and adaptation. Most outsiders only notice results later, but internally, the person already changed long before visible success arrived. This is one reason wealth-building journeys become deeply emotional, because they force people to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. For example, many people discover they do not actually lack opportunity. They lack sustained focus. Others discover they do not actually lack intelligence. They lack emotional control. Others realize they are addicted to distraction because silence forces them to confront dissatisfaction with their current life. And this becomes especially dangerous now because distraction has never been more accessible. A person can lose entire years scrolling endlessly while convincing themselves they are staying informed. But information alone does not change lives. Applied focus does. You do not need to consume endless content about success. You need to construct something consistently. That is where transformation begins. One focused hour repeated daily can outperform years of scattered ambition, because intensity matters less than consistency over time. This is difficult for modern minds to accept. People crave dramatic breakthroughs. But most wealth is built through repetitive, intelligent actions sustained longer than other people are willing to sustain them. A writer writes consistently. An investor contributes consistently. A creator publishes consistently. A business improves consistently. A disciplined person learns consistently. Then eventually, compounding transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary outcomes. This is why emotionally unstable people struggle financially long term, not because they are incapable, because inconsistency interrupts compounding repeatedly. They start, stop, restart, quit, overreact, lose patience, seek shortcuts, abandon systems too early. Meanwhile, the calm builder continues quietly. That quiet persistence becomes almost unfair over long enough timelines. And here is something important you need to understand. Your first money machine probably will not change your life immediately. That expectation destroys many beginners. The first project may fail. The first business may struggle. The first attempt may feel small. That is normal. The purpose of the first machine is not perfection. It is transformation. You are learning leverage, learning systems, learning behavior, learning value creation, learning patience, learning adaptation. These lessons become assets themselves. A failed project can still create a stronger future builder. That is why successful people often sound calm discussing failure. Failure stopped feeling personal to them. It became information. This emotional shift is powerful. When fear controls someone, every mistake feels like identity collapse. When growth controls someone, mistakes become direction. And this mindset becomes essential in the age we are entering now. Because modern wealth increasingly rewards creators, problem solvers, educators, system builders, innovators, and adaptable thinkers, not just obedient workers. That does not mean traditional jobs are worthless. Far from it. A job can become powerful fuel, but only if you stop treating it like the final destination. The wealthy often use employment strategically. They extract skills, capital, connections, experience, understanding. Then they slowly redirect those resources toward ownership. This is why financial awakening changes daily behavior. You stop spending every dollar emotionally. You stop wasting every evening passively. You stop treating weekends only as escape. You stop thinking purely short-term. Instead, you begin quietly constructing, and construction changes self-respect. There is something psychologically powerful about knowing you are building instead of merely surviving, even before the money arrives. Because movement creates hope, real hope, not fantasy, not empty motivation, progress-based hope. A quiet confidence starts developing. You begin seeing possibilities where you once saw walls. And eventually, something surprising happens. Fear loses authority, not because life became perfectly certain, because your capability increased. That is the real goal. Not building a perfectly predictable future, building yourself into someone capable of navigating uncertainty intelligently. Because certainty is fragile. Capability is resilient. If this chapter resonates with you, leave yourself one honest reflection tonight. What would I attempt if embarrassment no longer controlled me? That question can expose entire hidden futures inside a person. And in the next chapter, we are going to explore something even deeper. Why the rich obsess over ownership while most people unknowingly rent almost every part of their life. Because once you understand the emotional difference between owning and merely accessing, you begin seeing the entire economy through different eyes, and that perspective shift changes behavior permanently. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comment section, and, most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 4. Ownership changes the way you breathe. There is a different kind of calm that enters a person's life when they begin owning pieces of the world instead of renting survival from it. Not luxury, not ego. Calm. The calm of knowing your entire future is not hanging by a thread tied to somebody else's decisions. Most people never experience that feeling because they spend their entire lives inside systems designed around temporary access. Monthly payments, monthly subscriptions, monthly salaries, monthly dependents, everything rented, everything recurring, everything fragile. And slowly, without realizing it, people begin renting even their identity. Their confidence depends on employers. Their emotional stability depends on income cycles. Their self-worth depends on external approval. That is not freedom. That is psychological dependency wearing professional clothing. Ownership changes that relationship completely. Because ownership shifts you from reactive living to strategic living. You stop asking, "How do I survive this month?" and begin asking, "How do I build something that survives beyond me?" That question creates adults out of dreamers. A young woman in Nigeria once described the exact moment she understood ownership emotionally. She had spent years working inside customer service roles, constantly exhausted, constantly replaceable, constantly anxious every time management changed policies. Then one evening, after work, she uploaded a small educational course online based on skills she had learned over years of experience. The first month, almost nothing happened. The second month, one stranger bought it. Then another. Then another. It was not the amount of money that changed her emotionally. It was the realization. For the first time in my life, she said, money entered my account from something I owned instead of hours I sold. That moment changed the way she saw reality forever, because ownership rewires the human mind. A worker thinks in schedules. An owner thinks in systems. A worker asks for permission. An owner asks what can be improved. A worker fears replacement. An owner builds leverage. A worker survives month to month. An owner thinks in decades. This is why wealthy people often appear emotionally different around money. They are not calmer because they love money more. They are calmer because systems reduce panic. A person with one fragile income source experiences life differently than someone with multiple flowing streams connected to assets, investments, systems, or ownership structures. And understand this clearly, ownership is no longer limited to factories, skyscrapers, or giant corporations. This is one of the biggest mindset shifts of modern wealth creation. Today, ownership can look digital: a newsletter, a content library, a software tool, a personal brand, a licensing agreement, a niche audience, a monetized skill, an online education platform, a small automated business, a portfolio, a community, a media channel. The internet changed leverage forever. One thoughtful piece of value can now travel globally while you sleep. That was impossible for most of human history, but most people still operate psychologically like it is 1995. They still believe opportunity belongs only to giant institutions. Meanwhile, individuals quietly build extraordinary systems from ordinary rooms every day. And here is what makes this difficult emotionally. Ownership requires delayed validation. Employment gives immediate feedback. You work today. You get paid soon. Ownership often feels invisible initially. You build. Nothing happens. You continue building. Still little happens. You doubt yourself. You continue anyway. This emotional gap destroys impatient people, because the beginning of ownership often looks unimpressive: a tiny channel, a small portfolio, a weak first product, a rough business idea, an audience of 12 people. But every empire once looked small. Every system once looked fragile. Every machine once looked unfinished. The problem is that most people judge beginnings as if they should already resemble outcomes. That expectation kills momentum. A man in Argentina started posting short financial education videos online after work. For 8 months, almost nobody watched. Friends joked about it. Relatives questioned why he was wasting time. Then one video unexpectedly reached millions. That visibility turned into consulting. Consulting turned into courses. Courses turned into a company. The company created investments. Investments created stability. Years later, outsiders only saw success. They never saw the lonely, invisible phase where discipline existed without applause. This is why emotionally mature builders stop needing immediate recognition. Because they understand something powerful. Attention is temporary. Ownership is durable, and durability matters more than appearance. There are people looking wealthy online while secretly drowning financially. There are people appearing ordinary while quietly building life-changing systems underneath the surface. Never confuse visibility with security. Real builders often move quietly, not because secrecy is glamorous, because construction requires concentration. One of the greatest financial mistakes modern people make is performing success instead of building it. Expensive appearances, luxury signaling, lifestyle inflation designed for social validation. Meanwhile, internally, no investments, no leverage, no systems, no assets, no freedom. That is not wealth. That is financial theater. And financial theater is exhausting because maintaining appearances consumes enormous emotional energy. Builders redirect that energy toward acquisition instead, acquiring skills, acquiring systems, acquiring assets, acquiring leverage, acquiring time freedom, and eventually those invisible acquisitions create visible stability. This is why wealthy thinking often feels emotionally boring to highly impulsive people. Long-term thinking is quiet. Compounding is quiet. Patience is quiet. Discipline is quiet. But panic is loud. Consumption is loud. Desperation is loud. Insecurity is loud. Pay attention to who constantly needs to display success publicly. Very often, the loudest displays hide the deepest instability. Truly secure people rarely need to convince strangers they are successful. Their life speaks softly for them. And there is another layer to ownership nobody discusses enough. Ownership changes dignity. A father who owns a business thinks differently than one terrified of losing his only paycheck. A creator with monetized systems sleeps differently than someone fully dependent on one employer. An investor with assets experiences uncertainty differently than someone with nothing compounding behind the scenes. Because ownership creates breathing room. And breathing room changes human psychology. Stress narrows thinking. Panic shrinks imagination. Financial fragility reduces creativity, but stability expands mental capacity. This is why financial freedom is not just about buying things. It is about reclaiming mental space, the ability to think clearly again, the ability to choose intentionally instead of react desperately, the ability to spend time with people you love without hidden panic running underneath every conversation. There are people sitting at dinner tables, physically present but mentally calculating bills the entire time. That kind of invisible stress slowly steals life from people. And many never realize how deeply financial pressure affects emotional health. Arguments increase, patience decreases, dreams shrink, risk tolerance disappears, hope fades quietly. This is why building money machines is an act of emotional responsibility too, not greed, responsibility, especially if you care about future family, future peace, future options. Because one of the greatest gifts you can offer people you love is reduced chaos, calm, stability, time, presence, and ownership increases the probability of all four. But there is a dangerous misunderstanding you must avoid. Ownership does not mean arrogance. Some people learn about wealth and immediately become obsessed with status, superiority, and ego. That mindset eventually destroys them. Because sustainable wealth requires humility. Markets change. Industries shift. Technology evolves. Mistakes happen. Humble builders adapt faster than arrogant ones. This is why emotionally intelligent, wealthy people remain students constantly. Learning never stops. A creator studies attention. An investor studies cycles. A business owner studies behavior. A leader studies communication. A builder studies systems. Growth itself becomes part of identity. And this creates one of the greatest long-term advantages imaginable. Because the person continuously evolving eventually becomes extremely difficult to financially destroy. Think about that. A person with skills, adaptability, emotional discipline, communication ability, and ownership thinking can recover from setbacks far faster than someone entirely dependent on external structures. That resilience is real wealth, not flashy consumption, not internet performance. Resilience, the ability to rebuild. If this message resonates with you, take a moment and reflect honestly on this question. What do I currently own that could continue creating value even if I stopped working temporarily? Do not judge yourself for the answer. Awareness comes before transformation. And for many people, this audiobook may become the beginning of that transformation. Because once ownership thinking enters your mind, ordinary life starts looking different. You stop seeing purchases only as enjoyment. You start seeing trade-offs. You stop seeing jobs only as security. You start seeing opportunities for leverage. You stop seeing time casually. You begin protecting it intentionally. And eventually, another realization appears. The real enemy was never lack of money alone. It was lack of clarity. Because many people are capable of building wealth. But emotionally scattered people struggle to build anything lasting. That is why the next chapter may be one of the most important in this entire audiobook. We need to talk about focus, not productivity hacks, real focus, the kind that separates people who dream endlessly from people who quietly transform their entire future one concentrated season at a time. Because in the modern world, attention itself has become a money machine, and most people are giving theirs away for free. Chapter 5. Attention is the new oil. A distracted person cannot build a powerful life, not because they lack talent, because their energy leaks in too many directions at once. And modern life was engineered to scatter attention constantly. Notifications, algorithms, short videos, endless outrage, infinite scrolling, artificial urgency. Digital noise arriving every second like psychological pollution. Most people no longer live intentionally. They react continuously. And reaction is the enemy of construction. Think about how difficult deep focus has become. A person sits down to work. 5 minutes later, they check messages, then social media, then news, then random videos, then comparison, then anxiety, then exhaustion. Hours disappear. Nothing meaningful gets built. And afterward, they tell themselves they are tired from working. But distraction exhausts the human brain differently than concentrated effort. Scattered attention creates mental fog. Focused attention creates momentum. That distinction matters enormously because wealth increasingly belongs to people capable of sustained concentration in a world addicted to interruption. A programmer in Japan once described focus as financial oxygen. At first the phrase sounded dramatic. Then he explained what he meant. Every major opportunity in my life came from periods where I disconnected from noise long enough to build something valuable. That sentence contains enormous truth. Money machines are rarely built during chaos. They are built during concentrated seasons, quiet seasons, disciplined seasons, unimpressive seasons where somebody repeatedly chooses creation over distraction. And this becomes emotionally difficult because distraction provides instant emotional reward while building often delays reward. Scrolling feels easy immediately. Learning feels difficult immediately. Entertainment feels comfortable immediately. Construction feels uncertain immediately. So weak attention naturally drifts toward stimulation instead of growth. This is why focus is no longer just a productivity skill. It is a survival skill because the future belongs increasingly to people who can think clearly for long periods without emotional fragmentation. And most people are losing that ability. A man in California once realized he had not spent more than 15 uninterrupted minutes thinking deeply in nearly 3 years. 3 years. His mind had become completely conditioned for interruption, constant input, constant stimulation, constant emotional shifting. When he finally attempted to build something meaningful independently, he discovered an uncomfortable reality. His attention span had been quietly destroyed. That realization changed his life. He began rebuilding focus deliberately, long walks without his phone, deep work sessions, reading books slowly again, removing unnecessary digital noise, protecting morning mental clarity aggressively. Months later, his creativity returned. Then his business improved. Then his emotional stability improved. Then his financial trajectory changed. Because attention affects everything. A distracted mind struggles to notice opportunities. A distracted mind struggles to execute consistently. A distracted mind struggles to think long-term. A distracted mind struggles to build systems. This is why highly focused people often appear unusually calm. Calmness is not always personality. Sometimes it is protected attention, and protected attention creates strategic thinking. There is a reason many wealthy builders become selective about environments, conversations, and even relationships. Because energy matters, a person constantly surrounded by chaos eventually becomes mentally chaotic themselves. Negative people drain focus. Drama drains focus. Emotional instability drains focus. Comparison drains focus. Overconsumption drains focus. And focus determines construction speed. One deeply concentrated year can alter an entire decade, but few people ever experience deep concentration anymore. Most live in partial attention permanently, half listening, half working, half thinking, half present. And half presence creates half results. A woman in France once spent an entire year building a digital language platform after work. No dramatic social life, no constant entertainment, no obsession with appearances, just repeated concentrated effort. At the end of that year, the project generated more income than her previous full-time job. People around her called the result surprising, but nothing about it was surprising. Focused effort compounded. That is what happened. And this is why modern attention economies are so dangerous psychologically. Companies profit when people lose control of focus because distracted people consume more, compare more, react more, buy more impulsively, think less independently. A focused person becomes harder to manipulate emotionally. That is powerful, especially financially, because builders need clarity more than excitement. Excitement starts projects. Clarity sustains them, and clarity often arrives in silence, not noise. This is why some of the most transformative moments in life happen during quiet reflection. Late-night thinking, long walks, journaling, deep conversations, intentional solitude. That space allows buried truths to surface. Truths like, I am wasting my potential. I am distracted constantly. I keep postponing important things. I am consuming more than creating. I have been emotionally escaping instead of building. Those realizations hurt, but they also awaken people. And awakening is uncomfortable before it becomes empowering. There is a reason many people avoid silence. Silence removes distraction. Distraction removes confrontation. Without confrontation, nothing changes. So people stay busy instead. Busy, but directionless. One of the saddest modern realities is how many people confuse stimulation with progress. Watching productivity content is not productivity. Talking about business is not business. Planning endlessly is not execution. Dreaming is not construction. Only focused action builds machines, and machines require repetition. This is the part impatient people hate. repetition. The same disciplined actions repeated long enough for momentum to emerge. A creator uploads consistently. An investor contributes consistently. A writer publishes consistently. A builder improves systems consistently. At first, the results appear tiny, but repetition creates identity, and identity creates destiny. That sentence matters more than most people realize, because eventually, disciplined behaviors stop feeling forced. They become normal. A focused person no longer negotiates constantly with distraction. A builder no longer waits emotionally for motivation every day. A disciplined investor no longer panics at every market movement. Stability becomes internal, and internal stability creates external results. This is also why emotionally reactive people often struggle financially. They change direction too quickly. Every setback becomes catastrophe. Every criticism becomes paralysis. Every slow month becomes panic. But builders understand cycles. Some seasons are invisible. Some seasons are slow. Some seasons test patience deeply. Yet they continue anyway. That emotional steadiness becomes leverage itself. A man in South Africa spent 2 years building a niche online education brand with almost no recognition. Tiny audience, tiny income, slow progress, but he stayed consistent. Eventually, the audience compounded, trust compounded, products improved, systems improved. Then 1 year changed everything, and people called it sudden success. But nothing about it was sudden. The roots had been growing underground the entire time. Nature itself teaches this principle constantly. Bamboo spends years growing invisible roots before exploding upward rapidly. Many people quit during the root phase of life because invisible growth feels emotionally unrewarding. But invisible growth is often the foundation for visible transformation. This is why comparison becomes so dangerous. You compare your invisible phase to somebody else's visible phase, and comparison destroys momentum, especially online. Social media shows outcomes constantly while hiding process almost completely. You see wealth, freedom, success, results. But you rarely see years of repetition, failures, loneliness, doubt, slow growth, invisible construction. That distorted perspective discourages people prematurely. Remember this carefully. Your timeline is not broken because progress feels slow. Most meaningful things grow slower than modern culture wants to admit. Trust grows slowly. Mastery grows slowly. Assets grow slowly. Reputation grows slowly. Wisdom grows slowly. But once momentum compounds, life can transform dramatically. If this audiobook is helping you reflect differently about your future, take a moment mentally and ask yourself something honest. What currently controls most of my attention? That answer often predicts future direction more accurately than goals do. Because attention shapes action. Action shapes habits. Habits shape identity. Identity shapes destiny. And in the next chapter, we are going to explore something extremely important. Why wealthy people become obsessed with learning while most people unconsciously stop evolving after formal education ends. Because in the modern economy, the person who learns fastest often builds the strongest money machines, and those who stop learning slowly become replaceable. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you are watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 6. The people who keep learning become dangerous. There is a moment in many adults' lives when growth quietly stops. Not physically, mentally, They finish school, get a job, learn routines, repeat familiar patterns. And without realizing it, they slowly become intellectually frozen while the world continues evolving around them. That freeze destroys financial potential more quietly than laziness ever could. Because modern wealth rewards adaptability. The person willing to learn repeatedly becomes almost unstoppable over long enough periods of time. Meanwhile, the person emotionally attached to old identities often gets left behind. A factory worker in Vietnam once spent years believing technology had nothing to do with him. Artificial intelligence, digital tools, online business, automation, all of it felt distant, irrelevant. Then his industry began changing rapidly. Positions disappeared, processes evolved, skills lost value. For the first time in his life, he understood something terrifying. The world does not pause because someone stopped learning. That realization forced him into discomfort. Night classes, online tutorials, new digital skills, awkward beginnings, embarrassing mistakes. At first, he felt ashamed. Then something unexpected happened. His confidence returned. Because growth creates energy, there is something deeply human about progress. A person learning again starts feeling alive again, and this matters financially more than most people realize. Because the richest opportunities of the next decade may not even fully exist yet. New industries are forming constantly, new systems, new technologies, new marketplaces, new forms of leverage. The people who remain curious adapt faster. Curiosity is a financial advantage now, a massive one. Yet many people secretly resist learning because learning temporarily damages the ego. Beginners feel vulnerable, and modern culture encourages people to protect appearances instead of embracing evolution. People want to look intelligent immediately, successful immediately, certain immediately. But builders understand something emotionally mature. Temporary incompetence is the price of future capability. Every expert once looked confused. Every entrepreneur once lacked experience. Every investor once misunderstood markets. Every creator once produced terrible work. Every skilled communicator once struggled to express themselves clearly. Growth always begins awkwardly, but awkward beginnings create extraordinary endings if sustained long enough. A young man in Egypt spent nearly 2 years teaching himself video editing after exhausting workdays. His first projects were terrible, slow, amateur, clumsy. But he continued, not because he felt naturally gifted, because he understood something powerful. Skill acquisition changes economic value, and eventually his ability became leverage. Freelance projects turned into recurring clients. Recurring clients turned into agency work. Agency work turned into systems. Systems turned into freedom. People often focus too heavily on motivation while ignoring capability. Capability creates confidence far more reliably than hype ever will. A person who knows they can solve problems walks differently through life, and learning expands problem-solving ability. This is why wealthy people often obsess over reading, studying, networking, observation, and adaptation. Not because they want endless information, because understanding compounds, knowledge compounds, perspective compounds, skills compound, connections compound. A single useful skill can alter an entire financial trajectory. Communication skills, sales skills, leadership skills, technology skills, creative skills, strategic thinking, negotiation, writing, marketing, systems thinking. The modern economy increasingly rewards people who combine multiple valuable skills together. And this creates enormous opportunity for ordinary individuals willing to learn consistently. The internet changed education forever. Right now, someone sitting in a small apartment with an old laptop can access world-class knowledge instantly. That would have sounded impossible 20 years ago. But access alone changes nothing. Application changes everything. This is why some people consume endless educational content while remaining financially stagnant. They are intellectually entertained but behaviorally unchanged. Real learning transforms action. A woman in Colombia once said something powerful after building a successful consulting business online. I stopped asking what degree people had and started asking what problems they could solve. That mindset shift changed her career permanently, because money often flows toward problem solvers, and problem solving requires learning. This is why rigid thinking becomes dangerous in modern life. A rigid person says, "This is how things have always been." A builder asks, "What is changing and how do I adapt early?" That flexibility creates enormous long-term advantage, especially now, because entire industries are being reshaped in real time. Artificial intelligence is changing workflows. Digital platforms are changing distribution. Remote systems are changing labor structures. Creator economies are changing media. Automation is changing operational costs. And people who adapt intelligently can build extraordinary leverage. But adaptation requires humility. The humility to admit, "I need to learn again." That sentence scares many adults because people often attach identity to what they already know. But the strongest people emotionally are usually the most teachable. They are not embarrassed by growth. They expect it. A man in Canada left a stable corporate role at 46 years old and began learning online business systems from scratch. Younger people mocked him quietly. Friends questioned him. Even family doubted him. But he remained teachable. 3 years later, his digital assets generated more freedom than his old position ever did. The lesson was not that corporate jobs are bad. The lesson was this: a learning mind stays economically alive. A stagnant mind slowly becomes fragile. And this matters psychologically too. People who stop growing often become cynical. You notice it everywhere. They're all scams. It's too late now. Only lucky people succeed. The system is rigged completely. Nothing works anymore. Cynicism protects people emotionally from the discomfort of trying, because if success is impossible, then avoiding effort feels justified. But builders refuse emotional surrender. They stay curious instead, and curiosity keeps possibility alive. That mindset difference changes futures. A curious person experiments. A cynical person retreats. One expands. One contracts. And over decades, that difference becomes enormous. This is also why wealthy builders often protect their mental environment carefully. They limit constant negativity, limit hopeless conversations, limit emotional contamination from people committed to stagnation, not out of arrogance, out of psychological survival, because pessimism spreads, especially in groups. One discouraged person can quietly infect an entire environment with limitation thinking, and limitation thinking destroys initiative before action even begins. This is why mentors matter, books matter, healthy environments matter, conversations matter. Humans absorb emotional direction from surrounding influences constantly. A focused, growth-oriented environment accelerates transformation dramatically. Meanwhile, environments obsessed with complaining often trap people psychologically for years. And there is another truth many people resist. Learning requires sacrifice. Sometimes you must trade entertainment for education, comfort for capability, ease for expansion. A person watching random content for 5 hours every evening slowly becomes different than a person using those same hours to study valuable skills consistently. 5 years later, their lives may barely resemble each other. And the frightening part is how invisible this divergence feels at first. Tiny daily decisions quietly become identity. That sentence matters deeply because people often wait for dramatic life changes while ignoring the power of repeated small choices. 1 hour learning daily compounds, 1 hour building compounds, 1 hour practicing compounds. Eventually, those hours become expertise, and expertise creates leverage. This is why emotionally disciplined people often outperform naturally talented but inconsistent people long term. Consistency multiplies learning speed. A focused learner becomes dangerous because eventually they see patterns other people miss, opportunities others overlook, market shifts others ignore, emerging systems others dismiss. That awareness creates timing advantages, and timing matters enormously in wealth creation. The people who understand new systems early often build disproportionate results later, not because they are superhuman, because they moved before the crowd emotionally accepted the change. If this chapter resonates with you, ask yourself honestly tonight, what valuable skill, if mastered over the next 2 years, could completely change my financial future? Do not underestimate that question. One skill can create freedom. One skill can create leverage. One skill can rebuild confidence. One skill can redirect an entire life. And in the next chapter, we need to confront something uncomfortable. Why many people secretly sabotage wealth the moment progress begins. Because earning money and keeping wealth are completely different psychological games. And without emotional discipline, even successful people can quietly destroy their own future. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 7. Why some people destroy their own wealth. Money does not amplify character immediately. First, it exposes it. That is why some people become financially successful for a short period, then quietly collapse underneath the weight of their own habits. Not because they lacked opportunity, because internally they were still operating from emotional chaos. And emotional chaos eventually leaks into financial behavior. A person can build income while still carrying insecurity, still carrying impulsiveness, still carrying ego, still carrying desperation for validation. That combination becomes dangerous, especially when money finally arrives. A young entrepreneur in Dubai once went from struggling financially to earning more in 18 months than he had earned in the previous 10 years combined. At first, it felt like freedom. Then something changed. The expensive watches, luxury restaurants, constant travel, parties, status displays, impulse purchases designed to prove something invisible. Within 3 years, despite massive income, he was financially unstable again. Later, he admitted a painful truth. I thought I was celebrating success. Really, I was medicating old insecurity with expensive distractions. That sentence explains more financial destruction than most economics textbooks ever will. Because wealth is emotional before it becomes mathematical. A financially intelligent person with emotional discipline can slowly build extraordinary stability over time. An emotionally unstable person can destroy enormous opportunity surprisingly fast. This is why self-control matters so much, not as punishment, as protection. Modern culture constantly encourages emotional impulsiveness. Buy now, show now, upgrade now, consume now, display now. Very little encourages restraint, but restraint is one of the hidden superpowers behind long-term wealth. A person who can delay gratification consistently gains enormous strategic advantage over people controlled by immediate emotion. And this principle affects far more than spending. It affects relationships, business decisions, investments, partnerships, negotiation, lifestyle, risk management. Emotionally reactive people often sabotage momentum because they confuse temporary feelings with permanent truth. They panic too early, celebrate too early, quit too early, overspend too early, trust too quickly, expand too aggressively. Builders learn emotional pacing instead. Calm during progress, calm during setbacks, calm during uncertainty. Not emotionless, stable. There is a difference. A woman in Australia built a successful online design agency after years of disciplined growth. The income finally became substantial. Suddenly, everyone around her expected visible luxury, bigger apartment, luxury car, expensive lifestyle, but she continued living below her means intentionally. Friends quietly judged her. Some even mocked her restraint. 5 years later, during an economic downturn, many of those same people faced severe financial stress while she remained stable because her systems, investments, and reserves were already built. That is what emotional maturity looks like financially. The ability to prioritize future peace over present performance. And this becomes increasingly important because success itself creates new psychological traps. Ego, comparison, overconfidence, lifestyle inflation, identity attachment. Some people become successful temporarily and immediately start believing they are untouchable. That mindset destroys empires. History repeats this lesson constantly. Businesses collapse from arrogance. Investors collapse from greed. Creators collapse from ego. Athletes collapse from excess. Leaders collapse from emotional blindness. Success without self-awareness becomes dangerous. That is why grounded people often sustain wealth longer. They continue learning, continue adapting, continue preparing, continue respecting uncertainty. Humility protects builders. Arrogance blinds them. And one of the biggest financial dangers modern people face is lifestyle expansion without psychological discipline. This happens constantly. Income increases, expenses increase immediately. Comfort expectations rise, luxury becomes normalized. Financial pressure quietly returns despite higher earnings. That cycle traps millions. A person making 10 times more than before can still feel financially anxious if their lifestyle expanded faster than their systems. That is why income alone does not create freedom. Margin creates freedom. The gap between earning and dependency. And many people unintentionally eliminate that gap the moment progress appears, because emotionally they want evidence that success is real. So they purchase visible proof. But visible proof often delays invisible stability. And invisible stability matters more, always. There is another hidden danger too. People who grew up financially stressed sometimes struggle emotionally when money finally arrives. Scarcity thinking remains inside them. Fear remains. Panic remains. Emotional spending remains. Self-sabotage remains. This is why inner work matters alongside financial growth. A person must become emotionally capable of handling greater opportunity. Otherwise, opportunity overwhelms them. A man in New York once described how his first major business success triggered intense anxiety instead of happiness. He constantly feared losing everything, checked accounts obsessively, could not relax, could not sleep properly. Eventually, he realized something painful. His income had changed faster than his identity. Internally, he still felt unsafe. That insight transformed his life, because sustainable wealth requires internal stability too, not just external achievement. This is rarely discussed enough in financial conversations. People focus heavily on acquisition while ignoring emotional sustainability. But what is the point of financial success if your nervous system remains trapped in permanent stress? Real wealth should create greater peace over time, not deeper chaos. That is why emotionally mature builders prioritize health, relationships, boundaries, recovery, and clarity alongside money. Because eventually, they understand something many ambitious people learn too late. A destroyed mind cannot enjoy success properly. Neither can a destroyed body, or destroyed relationships, or permanent emotional exhaustion. Balance matters. Not perfect balance every day. Intentional balance over seasons. There will be intense periods of construction, sacrifice, long hours, deep focus. But sustainable builders eventually learn rhythm, work deeply, recover intentionally, protect mental clarity, protect physical energy, protect emotional stability. Because money machines are useless if the operator collapses. This becomes especially important now because burnout has become normalized. People glorify overwork while secretly deteriorating inside. Exhausted, disconnected, emotionally numb, unable to enjoy progress. That is not intelligent ambition. That is imbalance disguised as discipline. Real discipline includes recovery. A focused athlete understands recovery builds performance. A focused entrepreneur eventually learns the same lesson. Mental clarity requires restoration, and restored minds make better decisions. Better decisions create stronger systems. Stronger systems create calmer lives. Everything connects. This is also why wealthy people increasingly value time more than appearances. A calm morning matters. Freedom of schedule matters. Mental space matters. Presence matters. Because eventually, mature builders understand the final purpose of money. Not endless consumption, expanded life quality, the ability to live intentionally. And intentional living requires emotional intelligence. Otherwise, people simply recreate chaos at higher income levels. A financially successful but emotionally unstable person can still live miserably. That truth surprises many people, because society teaches people to chase money without teaching them how to carry it wisely. So when wealth arrives, some people amplify their dysfunction instead of their freedom. This is why personal growth and wealth building must evolve together. A calm mind handles money differently than a chaotic mind. A patient person invests differently than an impulsive person. A grounded person builds differently than an insecure person. Character compounds too, and long-term wealth often reflects long-term emotional habits more than people realize. If this chapter resonates with you, reflect honestly on this question tonight. If my income doubled tomorrow, would my habits protect that opportunity or slowly destroy it? That answer reveals a lot about financial readiness, because becoming wealthy and remaining wealthy are completely different skill sets. And in the next chapter, we are going to explore one of the most powerful shifts any human being can make. The moment they stop seeing themselves only as workers and begin seeing themselves as creators of value. Because the richest people in the modern world often do not earn more because they work harder. They earn more because they learned how to multiply value at scale. And once you understand that principle, you stop looking at your future the same way ever again. Chapter 8. The people who multiply value control the future. The world quietly rewards one type of person more than any other. Not the loudest, not the busiest, not even the smartest in the traditional sense. The people who learn how to create value at scale. That is where modern wealth truly begins separating itself from ordinary income. A worker trades hours. A builder multiplies impact. And the difference between those two paths becomes enormous over time. A teacher speaking to 30 students in one classroom creates value locally. A teacher who turns that same knowledge into digital systems can create value globally while sleeping. Same person, same knowledge, different leverage. That is the game most people never fully understand. The wealthy often become wealthy because they stop selling effort alone and start building systems that extend their effort far beyond their physical presence. A writer creates one book read by millions. A musician records one song streamed endlessly. A software creator builds one tool used thousands of times daily. A business owner creates one process repeated automatically. An investor allocates capital into systems already producing value. Scale changes everything, and technology amplified scale more in the last decade than most people emotionally comprehend. Right now, one focused individual with internet access can reach more people in a month than entire companies could reach 30 years ago. That shift created extraordinary opportunity. But opportunity means little without understanding. Most people still think linearly. Hours equal money. More hours equal more money. That model eventually breaks. Not immediately, but eventually. Because time is limited, energy is limited, attention is limited, human output is limited. This is why wealthy builders become obsessed with leverage. Leverage allows effort to continue producing results beyond the initial action. And there are many forms of leverage now. Technology leverage, audience leverage, capital leverage, media leverage, skill leverage, system leverage, relationship leverage. Understanding leverage changes ambition itself. A man in South Korea once spent years believing financial freedom required working endlessly. He respected hard work deeply. His parents had sacrificed everything through labor. So he repeated the same model: long hours, minimal rest, constant exhaustion. Then one evening, after another draining workday, he asked himself a question that changed his life. Why am I solving the same problems manually every day instead of building systems that solve them automatically? That question created transformation. He began studying automation, systems, digital operations, process optimization. Years later, he worked fewer hours while creating dramatically more value, not because he became lazy, because he became strategic. That distinction matters. Builders are not avoiding effort. They are maximizing the effectiveness of effort. There is wisdom in that. A farmer who plants seeds intelligently eventually feeds villages, while another person keeps carrying buckets endlessly by hand. Both are working, but one creates scalable systems. This is why modern wealth increasingly belongs to thinkers capable of designing repeatable value structures. And here is something important. You do not need millions of followers or global fame to build leverage anymore. That illusion discourages many people unnecessarily. A niche creator serving a focused audience can build remarkable stability. A specialized consultant can build high-value systems quietly. A small software product can generate recurring income globally. A modest investment portfolio can compound powerfully over decades. Modern leverage rewards precision, not just scale. That is encouraging for ordinary people willing to focus deeply. A woman in Kenya started a small online educational platform helping students prepare for professional exams. Tiny audience initially, almost invisible, but she understood her audience deeply. Over time, trust compounded, systems improved, products expanded, referrals multiplied. Eventually, her business generated more stability than many traditional corporate careers. Not through luck, through multiplied value. This is why solving real problems matters so much. Money follows usefulness remarkably often. People desperately search for shortcuts while ignoring the simplest principle underneath sustainable wealth. Become useful at scale. The more valuable problems you solve, the more economic opportunity often follows. And valuable problems exist everywhere, helping people save time, helping people make decisions, helping people communicate, helping people become healthier, helping businesses improve systems, helping creators grow audiences, helping organizations reduce costs, helping communities learn faster. Opportunity hides inside problems constantly. Builders train themselves to notice this. While others complain, builders observe. Observation becomes advantage, and this requires curiosity again. Curious minds notice unmet needs. Rigid minds repeat old patterns. That is why some people keep discovering opportunities others miss completely. They are paying attention differently. A young developer in Brazil noticed thousands of small businesses struggling with appointment scheduling. Most people ignored the problem because it looked ordinary. He built a simple software solution. Years later, that ordinary problem became extraordinary leverage. This is one reason wealthy people often sound calm discussing opportunity. Once you understand value creation, opportunity starts appearing everywhere, not magically, practically. You begin seeing inefficiencies, gaps, needs, emerging behaviors, changing habits, technological shifts, and where most people see chaos, builders often see openings. This mindset shift is powerful, especially emotionally, because powerless people wait for permission. Builders look for possibilities, and possibility thinking changes the nervous system itself. A person building something meaningful experiences life differently than someone trapped purely in reaction mode, even during difficult seasons, because construction creates forward movement. Forward movement creates hope. And hope matters more than people realize. A hopeless person stops trying. A hopeful person experiments, learns, adjusts, continues. This is why protecting mindset matters financially too. Not fake positivity, real perspective. The perspective that systems can be learned, skills can be developed, opportunities can be created, value can be multiplied. That belief creates action, and action changes lives. There is another important truth here. Creating value at scale requires communication. No matter how brilliant someone is, if they cannot communicate clearly, influence becomes limited. This is why communication has become one of the highest paying skills in the modern world. The ability to explain ideas, build trust, inspire confidence, create emotional connection. Teach clearly. Lead attention. These abilities multiply opportunity dramatically. A creator who communicates well scales faster. A leader who communicates well builds stronger teams. A salesperson who communicates well creates more leverage. An educator who communicates well reaches more people. Communication itself became economic leverage. That is why emotionally intelligent people often outperform technically gifted people long term. Humans buy emotionally first and justify logically afterward, more often than they realize. Trust matters, energy matters, clarity matters, and this creates enormous opportunity for authentic people. Because despite all the noise online, people still deeply crave sincerity, real stories, real insight, real wisdom, real value, not endless performance. A man in Italy started documenting his small woodworking business online with simple, honest videos. No luxury image, no fake branding, just craftsmanship, discipline, and transparency. Over time, people connected emotionally with authenticity. His audience grew slowly but deeply. Products expanded, brand trust strengthened. Eventually, his ordinary workshop became a globally recognized business. Authenticity scaled. That matters. Because some people believe modern success requires becoming fake, loud, or manipulative. It does not. Sustainable leverage often grows strongest through trust, and trust compounds beautifully over time. But trust requires consistency. People must repeatedly experience reliability from you. Reliable work, reliable communication, reliable value. That consistency becomes reputation, and reputation itself becomes a money machine eventually. Opportunities start arriving through trust networks. Partnerships emerge, referrals emerge. Influence expands. This is why character matters economically more than many people realize. A dishonest person may achieve temporary gains, but long-term leverage usually depends on sustained trust. And sustained trust requires integrity, especially now when people are exhausted by manipulation, exaggeration, and artificial performance constantly flooding digital environments. Authenticity stands out increasingly. Not loud authenticity, quiet authenticity, the kind rooted in real skill, real effort, and real value. If this audiobook resonates with you deeply, pause sometime today and ask yourself this question honestly. What problem could I learn to solve so well that people would gladly pay for the solution? That question can redirect an entire future. Because once you stop focusing only on earning and start focusing on multiplied value creation, the world opens differently. And in the next chapter, we are going to confront another hidden truth few people discuss openly. Why many individuals remain financially trapped, not because they lack intelligence, but because they unconsciously surround themselves with environments that punish growth. And once you understand how environment shapes ambition, you become far more careful about who and what influences your mind every day. Chapter 9. Your environment is quietly programming your future. Some people spend years trying to improve their life while remaining surrounded by environments that punish growth. And eventually, those environments win, not because the person is weak, because human beings absorb emotional direction constantly. The conversations around you matter. The standards around you matter. The expectations around you matter. The energy around you matters more than most people understand. A person trying to build discipline inside an environment addicted to distraction will struggle emotionally every day. A person trying to build wealth inside an environment that mocks ambition will constantly battle internal conflict. A person trying to evolve while surrounded by people committed to stagnation eventually faces a painful decision: stay comfortable or grow. And growth often changes relationships before it changes finances. That truth surprises many people. A young man in Spain once began studying investing, online business systems, and financial psychology after years of living impulsively. He stopped wasting weekends constantly, stopped overspending, stopped participating in endless gossip conversations with old friends. At first, people laughed. Then they criticized him. Then they called him different. What they really meant was this: you are changing in ways that make us uncomfortable. That happens often because growth unintentionally confronts people who are avoiding their own potential. And many individuals would rather normalize mediocrity collectively than evolve individually. That sounds harsh. But observe life honestly. How often do people encourage discipline compared to distraction? How often do people celebrate wisdom compared to entertainment? How often do people discuss ownership compared to consumption? Modern culture constantly pulls attention toward short-term stimulation, and environments shape behavior quietly over time. A person surrounded by financially intelligent conversations starts thinking differently. A person surrounded by endless negativity starts shrinking psychologically. A person surrounded by builders eventually begins building too. This is why wealthy people often become intentional about proximity, not from arrogance, from awareness. They understand something emotionally mature: energy transfers, fear transfers, ambition transfers, discipline transfers, cynicism transfers, focus transfers. Human beings mirror environments constantly without realizing it. A woman in the Philippines once described how her entire financial trajectory changed after joining a small online community of entrepreneurs and creators. Before that, everyone around her normalized survival thinking. Just be grateful for what you have. Don't risk too much. Dream realistically. But inside this new environment, conversations sounded different. People discussed systems, ideas, execution, leverage, long-term thinking. For the first time, building wealth felt psychologically possible. That shift mattered enormously, because possibility is often environmental before it becomes personal. If nobody around you believes transformation is possible, your mind starts treating limitation as normal reality. That is dangerous, especially for ambitious people. A limited environment slowly trains people to reduce themselves, to stop trying, stop dreaming, stop risking, stop building, and eventually many people become emotionally domesticated by comfort. Not peaceful, domesticated. There is a difference. Real peace comes from alignment and stability. Domestication comes from surrendering growth to avoid discomfort. One expands life. The other slowly shrinks it. This is why some people secretly feel restless even when life appears stable externally. Their soul knows they are capable of more, but their environment keeps rewarding sameness, and sameness becomes addictive. Predictable routines, predictable conversations, predictable limitations. Years pass quickly there, too quickly. One of the saddest things in life is meeting people who abandon their potential simply because everyone around them normalized smallness. Not financially small, mentally small, emotionally small, vision small, courage small. A man in Turkey once admitted he spent nearly a decade suppressing business ideas because everyone around him constantly repeated the same phrase, "People like us don't become successful." That sentence became psychological programming, until one day he realized something profound. Every wealthy family lineage began with someone who refused inherited limitation thinking. That realization woke him up, because many invisible beliefs are inherited emotionally from environments long before people consciously examine them. Beliefs about money, beliefs about risk, beliefs about possibility, beliefs about identity. Some people inherit fear disguised as practicality. Others inherit scarcity disguised as humility. Others inherit hopelessness disguised as realism. And unless examined consciously, these beliefs quietly shape entire lives. That is why awareness matters so much. Builders learn to question inherited mental frameworks. Who taught me this? Is this belief actually true? Does this mindset expand my future or reduce it? Those questions create liberation, and liberation changes behavior. A powerful environment does not necessarily mean wealthy friends or elite circles. That misunderstanding confuses many people. Sometimes a powerful environment is simply one honest, disciplined person who challenges your thinking positively. A mentor, a book, a creator, a community. A conversation that expands perspective. Even digital environments matter now. What you consume daily becomes psychological nutrition. This creates dangerous comparison. You compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 15. And comparison destroys patience, especially online. Social media compresses years of effort into 30-second highlight reels. You see outcomes disconnected from process. That distortion causes many people to underestimate how long meaningful transformation usually takes. But real builders stop measuring progress emotionally day by day. They think in years. That mindset alone creates psychological advantage. A person obsessed with overnight success becomes fragile. A person committed to long-term construction becomes resilient. And resilience matters more than excitement. Always. This is also why wealthy people often appear less emotionally reactive to temporary setbacks. A market dip, a failed launch, a slow month. They understand cycles. They understand long-term positioning. Panic belongs to short-term thinking. Patience belongs to builders. And patience creates clarity. A rushed mind makes poor decisions. A patient mind sees patterns. This is especially important now because the modern world constantly pressures people into urgency. Urgency to buy, urgency to react, urgency to compare, urgency to consume, urgency to become successful immediately. But urgency often destroys intelligent decision-making. Some of the best financial decisions happen slowly. Careful investments, careful partnerships, careful system building, careful strategic positioning. Calm minds build stronger futures than frantic minds. If this chapter resonates with you deeply, pause tonight and reflect honestly on this question. What meaningful thing in my life have I abandoned too early because progress felt slow? That answer may reveal more about your future than any motivational quote ever could. Because often the difference between ordinary lives and extraordinary outcomes is not intelligence. It is endurance, the willingness to continue while results remain temporarily invisible. And in the next chapter, we are going to explore something even more important: why the richest builders eventually stop chasing money directly and begin chasing meaning, alignment, and purpose instead. Because strangely enough, people who create the deepest value often stop obsessing over money alone. And that shift changes everything.